Hey everybody, this is Stuart with Wine on a Dime, and today I'm going to be doing my first video in my WSET Level 2 series. I'm going to open with this one because this is the part that most people freak out about when it comes to worrying about like the WSET stuff. And I'm here to kind of guide you through it, but also tell you it's not a big deal on the Level 2. And that part is learning how to evaluate wines by tasting them. Like I said, it's not anything you have to worry about. It's not part of the exam. The blind tasting as part of the exam doesn't come in until the Level 3. The reason I want to do this though is because it's critical as part of the Level 2 for you to understand wine and tasting it so you can learn about it as you're going through the process, and also so you can start practicing your palate and getting everything conditioned, so that way if you decide to go into the Level 3, you already have a solid backbone in tasting at a Level 2. So this is an important step in your wine learning process. However, this is not going to be on your test, so don't worry about that. You don't have to taste any wines, do an evaluation on them, and get graded on it. You just get to go through the process of learning about the wine by tasting it. So think of this as more of learning how to explore it as you're studying. And then in Level 3, whenever I shoot that Level 3 video, that will be something you really need to hone in on and practice a lot, because that will be a required skill to pass your Level 3. All right, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Stuart Banky. I'm the owner of Wine on the Dime, and I am a WSET Level 3 certified individual dude. I went through and got my WSET Level 2 in 2018, and then I got my WSET Level 3 in 2019. And I have an entire vlog series on the channel that I'll put the playlist on above here somewhere, and you can go through and kind of see what those videos are like, as well as some of my experiences and tips for studying for those tests in those videos. But I don't have a tasting video on how to do the scorecard, so that is where we are going to start. So the 3 wines that I picked out, and I recommend if you can, you pause this video and go out and try to find these wines at your local wine store or grocery store or the closest things to them, because I'm actually going to be doing the assessment of these wines as part of this video. So you can actually play along at home or wherever you're at and go with me through the evaluation of these wines. All right, so the first one is the 2017 Kendall Jackson Grand Reserve Chardonnay from Santa Barbara County. The next one is the 2019 Kim Crawford Rosé from New Zealand. And the last one, and this is probably gonna be the one that's gonna be hardest to find, so find the thing closest to it, is the 2009 Negra Valdepeñas 100% Tempranillo from Spain. I got a 2009 on purpose. If you are looking for a Tempranillo, try to find something very close to this, because there is a very specific reason, especially in terms of coloration and development, as to why I chose this wine. So make sure you find something as close to this as possible. Let's get on with actually how to prep your area for an evaluation. All right, so the first thing you need to do is you need to make sure that your area is prepped and under the right conditions. First, make sure everything is clean and make sure there are no weird smells or anything in the area. Don't wear perfume, don't wear aftershave, cologne, anything like that. Axe body spray if you're still in like the late 90s, early 2000s. Don't do any of that stuff. Just clean, no smells. That's gonna be your best bet, so that way it doesn't taint any of your evaluation senses. Next is you wanna make sure you have a white space to review, especially when you're looking at wine. As you see, I have nothing white over here, but you know what? The WSET Level 2 back of like the little kind of study packet they give you is a great place to look at wine, because it's white and it's really nice white if you keep it clean. So that's always a little handy trick that you have right there. Next is you want to make sure you have the right wine glass. So they recommend an ISO glass for tasting. I looked online. Those things are pretty expensive, especially if you're just getting into this and you're not going to be using them often. So what I actually have is like a $3 glass that I got at a wine store. It is a what they call a white wine glass. It is a medium-sized bowl glass with a taper. Nothing fancy. And that's what I use. Make sure it's clean, no detergent smells. Like I said, you want to make sure nothing smells around here other than the wine. So clean glass, no smells, that's nice. Next is you want to have good lighting, and you want to have nice bright lights. I have a ton of lighting in here. I'll actually show you what my lighting kit looks like, and you'll see that I actually look down when I'm looking at it, and then I'll also hold it up because I have a white mat over my lights that are shining into my studio area, and that white mat allows for me to also use that as a white space in evaluating wine. So sometimes I'll look at it there, kind of figure out where the color is based upon that. I recommend if you're doing just at home, have a nice bright white light, like I'm talking about daylight, when you're looking in the shopping aisle, they call it daylight white. They're like 5600 Kelvin in terms of the temperature color. You want that and have it be top down, so when you're looking at a wine on the white, you can just see it through there. I'm kind of in a weird setup because of the studio. Otherwise, I would have a light shining right down on me too. So that is how you want to prep the air. Oh, and also have a bottle of water. It's just handy when rinsing out your mouth, rinsing out your glass, all that stuff. I encourage having a bottle of water available too. But overall, that's what you need to be prepped and getting your area ready. This advice works on if you're doing WSET 2 or if you're doing the diploma. Make sure your area is clean, well lit, perfume free. You have something white so you can look at coloration, and something to cleanse your palate when you need it. All right, so now I am actually going to be busting out the first bottle of wine that I'm going to be reviewing. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to walk you through the methodology and the process with this wine, and then we're actually going to go through a process where I perform the evaluation on the other two, just go straight into it, straight through it. So this is the Kendall Jackson Gran Reserve from Santa Barbara Chardonnay, the one that I mentioned at the beginning of the video. And when you're doing an evaluation, you only want to pour about 50 milliliters. All right, so like I said, you want 50 milliliters. In my glass, this is about what this looks like. Something that when you tip the bowl at about a 45-degree angle, you can see through the wine. It's not gonna pour out, and there's still enough space for you to look at the rim as well. So yeah, that's how much 50 milliliters is about. In this glass, depending on whatever glass you get, you might wanna try some measured pours. That way you kind of get an idea of where it should be before you just kind of start blind pouring and practicing. All right, so the first thing we're gonna be covering is appearance. There are 3 subsections within appearance. It's clarity, intensity, and color. So within clarity, it's gonna be clear or hazy. Those are gonna be kind of your options there. In terms of intensity, you have 3 options. It's gonna be pale, medium, or deep. In terms of color, this is where it gets a little interesting, because depending on what kind of wine you're evaluating, there's different ranges and different terminology. So you kind of have to learn what the difference between a white, a red, and a rosé are, which is why I chose those 3 wines here. All right, so for white wines, you have lemon, gold, and amber. For rosés, you have pink, salmon, orange. And for red, you have purple, ruby, garnet, tawny. So the thing here is, the further out you go, amber, orange, tawny, the more kind of orange to brownish they're gonna become, whereas the ones to the left are gonna be more brighter, less orange notes. So like lemon, obviously, is not orange. Amber might have some dark gold starting to turn orange elements going into it. Tawny is gonna have a noticeable amount of orange. Purple, none. So that's kind of the way that those ranges work. And as we go through the wines, you'll kind of see how those kind of play out. So those are the 3 sections. So let's take a look at this Chardonnay. So grabbing the glass, you're going to hold it at a 30 to 45-degree angle, and you're going to be looking at the white space. From this standpoint, I'm kind of getting a little bit of a color from here. I'm getting a little bit too much, so I'm actually going to hold it right about here. All right, so for this wine, I'm going to say it is a clear. It's medium. All right, so in terms of the color for this one, this is going to be a little tricky. It could be getting closer to gold. I would say probably if you let it develop another year or a little bit longer, it would definitively have gold. But in this case, I'm still gonna call it lemon. So for this one, the wine is clear and is a medium lemon. All right, so the next section is the nose. And in this section, we have 3 subsections: condition, intensity, and aroma. Condition is whether the wine smells clean or unclean. Unclean will be things that have like noticeable amounts of taint, like TCA, which will make the wine have like a very noticeable cardboard, wet cardboard sort of note. There are other types of impurities too that can happen. So that's what you're gonna be looking for in here. Things like too much volatile acidity, which would make it smell very much like balsamic vinegar. Lots of stuff. Then the next part is intensity, and this is where it starts, you actually have to start kind of really paying attention to where you're smelling things in the wine. The range for intensity is light, medium, pronounced. And the thing here is, where are you smelling this? So if the wine is pronounced a few inches away from the actual lip of the glass, the rim of the glass, you should be able to smell things and pick out individual things. So I could, if it was a pronounced nose, I could say it smells like lemon, apricot, apple, pear, things like that. You can get all of that being a few inches away. As you get closer, once your nose gets basically into the bowl, touching the rim. It's kind of hard to see here. This is about a medium intensity. So from here, I can pick stuff up and start evaluating. If you have to like cram that glass in and really move it around and aerate it out, that's a light intensity. So light, medium, pronounced. This wine, well, I'll get to that evaluation here in a second. And then the last thing you're gonna be looking for are aroma characteristics. And this is where you start actually smelling the things that wine is providing. So does it have those apple notes? Does it smell like grass? Does it have like a flinty note or smoke, campfire? Does it have a peach element? What kind of peach? Is it like an astringent rind, or is it like a juice? Or is it like a candied peach? All of these things are the types of things you're gonna be looking for when you're talking about the aroma characteristics. So let's take a look at this wine. So from this wine, I'm gonna say the intensity is medium. I always start with intensity because it lets me know how far I need to be in before I really have to start picking up stuff. It has a clean condition, so it is clean. And then from here, I'm getting red apple, pear, lemon. I'm getting a noticeable amount of alcohol on the nose. And the way you can tell on the alcohol is, for me, it actually burns my nose, like the inner lining of my nose going up through the nostrils. So that's how I can kind of detect that there's a noticeable amount of alcohol. You can swirl it around, kind of help open it up a little bit if you need to do that. All that air just really helps pull out the aromatics. So swirling it around actually does help. I'm getting a little bit of like a slight vanilla. So I'm also getting a little bit of like vanilla. There's a touch of like some sort of like herb, but I'm having a hard time picking it out. Maybe there is a touch of apricot in here. So you just want to kind of play around with it. Smell what you can smell. I'm also getting a little bit of like a tropical note. There's like maybe like a touch of mango, maybe some pineapple. And then I'm really getting some barrel notes. And it's more of like a sweet baking spice. Not like clove, but other types of things that you might associate with like baking pies. Maybe like a touch of pumpkin spice. Maybe that's a way of saying it. So overall, I would say this wine has a clean nose with moderate intensity or medium intensity. And then I would just list all those other things with aroma characteristics of just write them all down. And that's the nose evaluation for this wine. All right, so now we're going into the second to last section of the wine, which is the actual palate comparison. So in this, the subcategories are sweetness, acidity, tannin, body, and I'm gonna rearrange the last two, finish and characteristics. And so you'll be tasting the wine before you're gonna determine the actual finish. But in this case, I move them around because I always leave the aroma stuff for last because people get so fixated on that, sometimes they forget about the other stuff. So in terms of sweetness, the range you're gonna have for sweetness is dry, off dry, medium, and sweet. And in terms of acidity, you're going to have low, medium, high. That also applies with tannin. However, note, tannin only applies to red wines. So you will not really express tannin in white wine. There really should be no noticeable notes of tannin in a white wine, unless it's specifically made in a certain process, and I'm not gonna go into that in this video. Then for body, you have light, medium, and full. For finish, you have short, medium, and long. And then for the flavor characteristics, you're going back to all those same types of descriptors. Does it taste like apple? What kind of apple? Candied apple, green apple, red apple, all of that stuff. You're gonna be going through and you're gonna be trying to make sure that you taste what you smell. You wanna make sure those things align. So an example of something would be like, if you were actually evaluating a wine and you smell coconut, but you don't taste it, maybe you need to try tasting it a little bit harder, like really spending some time moving it around in the mouth. Or if you taste coconut and you don't smell it, go back and actually try to see if you can move it around in the bowl and really get your nose in there and try to get that aroma. You want your palate and your nose to really match up with each other. Let's go ahead and take a look at this wine. So now this is where you get to taste the wine. This is the fun part that most people like. So we're gonna start with sweetness. Really move that around, suck in air afterwards. All right, so from a sweetness standpoint, this is a dry wine. No noticeable notes of sweetness on this wine whatsoever. From acidity, I'm gonna give it a high acid. From a body standpoint, I'm giving this a full body. It has a lot of like space in my mouth. This is not something that you drink like water. It actually has a large presence in my mouth with the amount of alcohol, the amount of overall intensity, flavors, things like that. Then going into the finish, so far, this is probably getting close to a long finish. Now the thing with finish is it's not how long you're tasting the wine, it's how long the favorable elements of that wine are still being found within your palate. So if you're tasting something that is horrible for like a minute and a half afterwards, that's not the finish. If all the good tasting stuff finished 20 seconds in, that's the finish. Everything else is not good. That's not part of the finish. It's just there. So what you want is when the pleasurable taste ends, which for me is about now, and according to my timestamp, it's about a minute. That's a pretty long finish. Then at that point, that's when the finish ends. Now I'm just kind of tasting like a generic kind of like residue type note, like nothing of specific value. So I would say this is a long finish. And then from flavor characteristics, I'm tasting pretty much everything that I got on the nose. I would say the only exception would be I'm maybe getting a touch of like passion fruit, another tropical note. Yeah, so and then I would write down passion fruit in here, and then now I would go back and try to really see if I can get it in the nose. Spend some time with that. This is part of your helpful calibration. In the event that you're going through and you're trying to get everything to match and it doesn't, that's fine. This is a great starting point. Like I said, you're not being tested on it. Now going into the level 3 exam, I will give you a different bit of advice there. But for now, write down what you smell, write down what you taste. Try to see if you can get it all to match the best possible, really spend some time with it, but don't kill yourself if there are some discrepancies. I mean, it's not part of your test. You're just trying to learn at this point. All right, so the last part is assessment of quality. And there's only one section here, and that's just the quality. So let's look at what the possible grades for quality might be. You have faulty, poor, acceptable, good, very good, and outstanding. Now, if you've seen any of my wine review videos, I actually follow this same format, except instead of saying faulty, I say bad, because I have less manners than the WSET school does. The way you want to assess the quality is I use a little tool called BLIC, which stands for balance, length, intensity, and complexity. So using BLIC is a really good way for me to assess quality, and I recommend you do it too. When looking at things like balance, you want to see, does everything play well together? Does the fruit not overpower anything else? Is there the right amount of alcohol? Is the right amount of acid? You're just kind of one of things, like if something feels like it's really far out of bounds, like you're tasting this wine and it's like really flat and lazy, it doesn't have really like a lot of acid, then it's probably not in balance. It probably needs more acid to kind of boost those flavor elements up. So that would be an example of something that would not be within balance. So you can give it a point, you can give it half a point if most of it's there, but there's a little something out, like a little bit out of ways, you can give it half a point. I recommend when you're kind of just going through the level 2 and you're just first starting to evaluate wines using this methodology, you stick to 1 or 0 points whenever you're just kind of going through this. I think it'll help kind of keep things a little bit easier when you get down to the final assessment. And I'll show you how to apply the BLIC to the final assessment as well. Length, this one's really easy compared to balance. So if it's short, it's 0 points. If it's long, it's 1. If it's medium, I give half a point. If you can choose to give a point there too, but I do half a point. That's the way I do it. For intensity, this is the intensity of the characteristics within the wine. So is there, like if you're tasting it and I'm like, man, these really fresh fruit notes are there, but it's like that whole like vanilla and coconut that I'm tasting is really lazy, then it's not, like you want all the things to have the right level of intensity and really be presenting themselves. Now here's the trick, is some things might present themselves different ways. So you might have a lot of intensity in the primary fruit up front, but then all of those coconut and vanilla elements really show up in the finish while the primary fruit fades. That's fine, they still have intensity at that point. Not everything has to be intense at the same time, but If everything's kind of like intense up front and then it's really lazy going everywhere else, then those other elements aren't going to be considered intense. So on this one, I still also recommend you go either 0 or 1 points until you have more time to really expand your palate and taste to figure out if those wines are good or not. All right, so the last one is complexity, and this is just how much is there to the wine. Are you only tasting apple and pear? Well, then it's a simple wine and it's really complex, so there's really no points there. Are you getting a lot of primary fruit clusters? Are you getting a lot of things like apples and strawberries and raspberries and all of that stuff? But you're not really tasting anything like wet earth, baking spices, stuff like that. Then that would be probably a half point in terms of complexity. And then are you getting all of those things? Are you getting a lot of primary fruit, but then you're also getting barrel notes like that coconut, like that vanilla, like those baking spices? Are you getting some of those aging notes like coffee, dark chocolate, wet earth, mushroom? Then all that would go into a full point for complexity. All right, so let's talk about how Blick applies to the actual final score for a wine, or the quality of the wine. So if it's faulty, it's just faulty. There's some sort of taint like TCA, too much volatile acidity, things like that. If it's a poor wine, then it's gotten 0 points. It's received 0 points on the Blick. If it has 1 point, it is acceptable. If it has 2 points, it's good. 3 points, very good. 4, outstanding. So these are all really simple ways of doing it. Now, sometimes you might have something where you have 1.5 points, 2.5 points, things like that. What I'm gonna say at that point is go with your gut and base it on the other wines that you've tried that fall within those categories. So I've tried a lot of Chardonnays on my channel, and if I was trying this and I had it fall in between two, I would think, what are all the good ones I've had that I remember? What are all the very good ones I have where I remember? And where does this fall within closest to those? And then I would push it into that category. That's how I'd operate in this manner. All right, so looking at this wine, let's go ahead and go through this process. For balance, using Blick, I'm gonna start with balance. I feel like this wine is in balance. It has a lot of body, has a lot of alcohol, has a lot of acid. Everything is playing very well together. I don't feel like the fruit is all over the place. I'm tasting all these different elements and I'm getting some secondary. So I kind of like that. I'm gonna give it a full point on balance. Length, it has a long finish for me. It went on for a solid minute. Finish is a little bit subjective because some people might like certain flavors that other people don't. But for me, this wine went on for a long time, so I'm gonna give it a full point there. All right, so in terms of intensity, I got a lot of intensity for the primary fruit, but not really anything around the secondary notes. I really had to work hard to pull those out. And with it only being a 2017, I don't expect any tertiary, any aging notes. So for this, I'm gonna give you half a point. And then for complexity, I'm also gonna give you half a point because there were a lot of primary fruit clusters. I was getting a whole bunch of range in terms of everything from like green apple and pear all the way to like passion fruit and pineapple. But I was having a really hard time tasting those secondary notes. Though I could smell them, I was really having a hard time with them, and that's because they had a lack of intensity overall on the palate. So for this, I'm gonna give you half a point as well. So for balance, we have 1 point. Intensity, or 3, 2, 1. So in terms of final score, balance, I have 1 point. Length, I have 1 point. Intensity has half a point. Complexity has half a point. That adds up to 3. I'm gonna give you a very good rating. So, 2017 Kendall Jackson Gran Reserve Chardonnay from Santa Barbara, you are very good. All right, so now what I'm going to do is I'm gonna bring over the rosé and we're gonna do this whole thing again with the rosé, but this time I'm not gonna explain it. I'm gonna actually sit here and I'm gonna do a tasting. I'm gonna kind of get my notes together. I want you to do the same thing. And then I'm gonna go through and just say, all right, so from clarity, this is what I got. Intensity, this is what I got. I'm just gonna go through the whole thing and we're gonna compare notes. Well, I can't really compare notes with you. You can compare notes with me and see how you do. Stay tuned. All right, so if you're still with me, now we're gonna do this 2019 Kim Crawford Rosé from New Zealand. Luckily it's a screw top, so it's really easy to open. And I've cleaned my glass, just to make sure I'm gonna kind of shake out any water that might be in there. I'm gonna pour my sample. All right, so here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna evaluate this wine and then I'm gonna immediately clip into my assessment. So what I want you to do is I want you to pour yourself a sample, pause the video, do your assessment. When you feel like you're ready, click resume, and then let's go through and actually you can look at what I am writing down for my notes and you can kind of compare them to what you have. Okay, so let's go ahead and do the review of this Kim Crawford Rosé now. So in terms of clarity, it's clear. So in terms of intensity, it is pale. And I want you to look at the video that I have from my angle. It's almost water white whenever I'm looking through it. It's very hard to see a lot of coloration. Lots of light is coming through that wine whenever I'm looking at it. So I'm gonna give you a pale intensity. And then color, I gave it pink. All right, so that is the appearance. Now for nose, it is a clean nose, has medium intensity. So I was getting a little bit of red cherry, raspberry, strawberry, and then I was also getting watermelon and then some tropical notes. So I was also getting a little bit of passion fruit and some kind of stone fruit. I was getting like a slightly candied peach juice pulp type of note going on. And maybe a touch of lemongrass as well. There was a little bit of a grassiness to it. That also gave it a little bit of a citrus or aromatic note. So I'm gonna say it's more towards a grassy note, like lemongrass, because it wasn't like a stringent lemon, like a lemon peel, and it didn't smell juicy. In terms of the palate, this is a medium-bodied wine. It is dry, it has medium acid, short finish. I had a very short finish with this. It almost finished cleanly. It just was there, held on for a few seconds, and was gone. In terms of my palate, it matched my nose. I got all of those notes that I was getting. I didn't really get any surprises on there. All right, so now let's look at this from a quality perspective. In terms of balance, I gave it a full point. A lot of things were medium across the board, so it all kind of fit together. In terms of length, 0 points, had no length for me. In terms of intensity, I'm giving you half a point. There was a little bit of intensity with some of that passion fruit note and some of those citrus and watermelons. The berries kind of showed in and out. They had some intensity here and there, but it wasn't really solid enough for me to claim that I got a full point there. So I'm gonna give you half a point. In terms of complexity, I'm gonna give it half a point. I had a wide range of primary fruit, so I had a lot of berries, I had a lot of watermelon, and some kind of tropical notes with like passion fruit, and then I also had a little bit of like a lemongrass as well as a peach. I got a stone fruit, so there's a lot of range there, but I didn't get a lot of secondary notes. I didn't get any tertiary, so I'm gonna give you half a point. So overall, it comes up to 2 points. Kim Crawford is a good rosé. All right, so now doing the same thing, I'm gonna get the Valdepeñas. I'm going to pour it in here after I clean everything out, and then I'm gonna skip straight into the assessment. So if you have that one or something similar, clean out your glassware, clean off your palate, go grab that bottle, pour it, do your assessment, and then resume this video. All right, so let's start with the appearance. For my notes, I got a clear, medium garnet. I still see a little bit of red. It's not totally developed into the brown, so that's what I got on mine. Here's the video of me actually looking at it from my perspective, so you can kind of compare what you see compared to what I saw. All right, so for nose, I got a clean, medium intensity nose with black cherry, prunes, maybe a little bit figs. I also got some dried cranberry, leather, cedar, a little bit of earth, a slight hint of mushroom, and coffee. So a lot of development that's going on. There's not very much fresh fruit in here. Also, sorry, a touch of fresh raspberry. There's really not much freshness going into this. It's really had some time to get some age on it. And that's one of the reasons why I chose that 2009. It's gonna look different, it's gonna smell different, it's gonna taste different than anything that you're gonna get that's been bottled within the last year or two as a red wine, unless it's been aged prior to that. All right, so from the palate standpoint, I got a dry sweetness, high acid, medium tannins, medium body. In terms of finish, I have a medium finish. In terms of all the flavor characteristics, my palate matched my nose. I pretty much got everything there. I will say though that I'm tasting more coffee on here than I smelled, so the coffee is a little bit more intense, but pretty much everything that I smelled, I was able to pick out in the taste. Especially that prune and the coffee are really dominant in this wine. All right, so now going into quality. So from a balance standpoint, I think this wine is in balance. There's not too much alcohol, there's not too much body, there's not too much acidity, especially the fact that it has a nice, really high acid and it still has all that development. That's a really good sign that this wine was made well. So I really like that there. I'm gonna give it a full point. Length, half a point. Intensity, I'm gonna give it half a point. I just have a lot of intensity on that dried fruit. I wish there was a little bit more on what was remaining of the fresh fruit. The secondary characteristics like the cedar and some of the spiciness that I'm getting in there, I'm getting like a touch of cinnamon, I forgot to mention that. Those items in there are there, but they're not too intense. But then the tertiary really, I mean, there's a lot of intensity on those aging notes. That mushroom, that dirt, the coffee, all of the leather, all of that stuff is really kind of showing itself as long as with those aged fruits. So all of that, I'm gonna give it half a point because not everything was intense, but about half of it was. And then in terms of complexity, I'm giving you a full point here. I'm getting a little bit of fresh fruit, I'm getting dried fruit, I'm getting secondary notes, though they're not intense, and I am getting aging notes. So from there, you get a full point. That gives you 3 points. I'm gonna give the Valdepeñas 2019 Tempranillo a very good. All right, so in this video, we've gone through the WSET Level 2 tasting approach, systematic tasting approach. We've also gone through and reviewed 3 different wines. Now it's up to you to go and practice this, not necessarily as you're studying, but in supplement with it. Because if you're like me, if you have a glass of wine while you're studying, the study session's over. So what you need to do here is really spend some time sitting down with this, trying wines. Now, one of the things in the WSET Level 2 that's very important is geography and the wines of those regions. So what I expect you to do is to study those regions, and then if you have the opportunity, go out and try a few wines from there that look interesting to you. And so that way you can kind of taste what you're reading about. And so when things are talking about, oh, wines from like Northwest Italy and Piemonte, the red wines tend to be really high in tannins, high acid, very strong in structure. You can go in there and you can actually get a Barolo or a Barbaresco and try those out. But then also compare them to something like a Barbera, which is a different grape than Nebbiolo and has a little bit of a different structure to it, but is from the same area. So really use this as an opportunity to explore your palate, explore what you're learning in your textbook, and really learn to live into the systematic approach. Now, one thing I forgot to mention at the beginning of the video is the back of the card. The front card has all the criteria and all other stuff. The back of the card has things that you can kind of look out for, but you're not exclusively limited to these. So if you're tasting things that kind of fall outside this range, still feel free to put them down. If you're smelling stuff, maybe you're smelling like burnt toast instead of toast, that's fine. Campfire smoke, cool, put it down there. The things that you're smelling, write it down there because all of those things contribute to what you're experiencing with that wine when you're doing your assessment. Anyway, this has been Stuart with Wine on the Dime. Hopefully this WSET Level 2 tasting guide video has helped you in your WSET 2 studies. If it has, leave a like. Maybe think about subscribing to the channel, clicking that notification bell for future videos like wine reviews or other types of WSET educational content I publish. And I'll see you all again with another WSET or wine review or product review or something review from Wine on the